Hello everybody, welcome back to Tropical Update number 38 on Category 2 Hurricane Grace and Severe Tropical Storm Henri. Grace currently making its way towards landfall on mainland Mexico as Henri makes its way towards landfall in Long Island and then New England. So that's Henri. Henri's the big story today. Grace wrapping up its life, potentially my last update on it, depending on how long it lives over Mexico. So let's begin with Grace. Grace has hurricane warnings in effect for mainland Mexico from Puerto Veracruz to Cabo Rojo. The watches and warnings do remain the same from yesterday's update, but still to reiterate, tropical storm warning for mainland Mexico from Cabo Rojo to Barra del Tordo. Grace's winds now at 100 miles an hour as the latest recon pass, as we see an eye-like feature. We see cooler, or rather warmer clouds in the middle of those cooler white clouds, not a pinhole eye where we can see back down to the surface, but still an eye-like feature nonetheless, and very heavy convection on the landfall side of the storm at this point. Grace is going to weaken very rapidly once it makes landfall, and then the mid-level remnants and rain could reform in the Eastern Pacific. 80% chance of that happening as the latest update from the National Hurricane Center. We'll have another advisory out from the Hurricane Center at 10 p.m. Central, and then by the time we wake up tomorrow morning, Grace will have likely made landfall. Taking a look again at the odds of tropical storm force winds, very high in much of the region south of Cabo Rojo. As we see also, there is rainfall. Rainfall is going to be a huge threat with Grace. Grace 6 to 12, isolated 18 for Veracruz, Puebla, Tlaxcala, Hidalgo, Querétaro, and eastern San Luis Potosí. There's also going to be storm surge 4 to 6 feet near and just north of the landfall point. Again, storm surge a big concern. That's increased since our last update. We see the aircraft in the storm there. It flew through that heavy convection area I talked about on the landfall side of the storm and arguably had winds even stronger than the 100 miles an hour being reported now. Gusts are likely on this storm to be of major hurricane force. So that is a big concern for the people in Mexico. The good news is the area where Grace is going to be making its direct impacts, the heaviest impacts, is relatively low population. So that's good news. Henri's the complete opposite. The area where it will impact is one of the most densely populated areas of the United States. Henri's winds are currently at 70 miles an hour. It's expected to become a hurricane soon. We'll talk about that when we talk about recon on the next slide. A hurricane warning is in effect for Long Island from Fire Inlet on the south coast to Port Jefferson Harbor on the north coast, and from New Haven, Connecticut to Watch Hill, Rhode Island. Tropical storm warning from Port Jefferson Harbor on the north coast of Long Island to New Haven, Connecticut, and on the south coast of Long Island from Fire Inlet to East Rockaway Inlet. Hurricane watch from Watch Hill, Rhode Island to Sagamore Beach, Massachusetts, including Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and Block Island, and tropical storm watch from Massaquan Inlet, New Jersey to East Rockaway Inlet, New York, including New York City. Very high impact expected with Henri. Regardless of its landfalling strength, this will be a high impact storm. It's also not your typical nor'easter. Normally, the slowest reported speed, 24-hour speed over New England is 25 knots. That's its slowest speed. Henri is expected to be moving at about 5 to 6 knots. Normally, these big storms come and go out of the northeast. This one's going to be a big one, and completely unlike what we have ever seen. It's not going to be big in terms of intensity. It's not going to be big in terms of size. It's going to be big in terms of duration. It's going to be decently big in terms of intensity, but it's going to be no Sandy in terms of its size of impact. But still, it's certainly going to be the storm we're going to continue to watch. Storm surge watches and warnings also in effect with Henri at this point, and so we'll talk about those here in a little bit. Rainfall is also a concern, as we see from the latest forecast, much further to the west than where it was yesterday. Yesterday, we were talking about maybe Cape Cod. Now we're talking about somewhere between New York City and Cape Cod, and I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to move further west closer to New York City. Again, we don't want to induce panic, and this isn't going to be super strong storm, but nonetheless, this will be a big storm. Again, tropical storm force winds beginning Sunday morning for much of the United States coast. 3 to 6 inches, isolated 10 in terms of rain for Long Island and New England, especially Connecticut, western Massachusetts, parts of New York, Rhode Island, of course Long Island as well. We're really going to get a lot of rain from this storm. As we see from the latest recon, we do have some purple wind barbs, which does mean that this storm is making its way towards hurricane status. It's very much on the edge. We have 2 planes in it right now. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the night tonight, by the time we go to bed, Henri is a Category 1 hurricane. Let's talk storm surge real quick. Of course, a big concern, we see our tropical storm wind category watches and warnings on the bottom of the screen here, but or in the middle of the screen. But storm surge is also a big concern. 3 to 5 feet storm surge and a storm surge warning from Watch Hill, Rhode Island, all the way to Chatham, Massachusetts, and that includes Narragansett Bay, Buzzards Bay, Martha's Vineyard and the Vineyard Sound, Nantucket and Nantucket Sound, and Block Island. So that whole area, very watery, lots of small islands and whatnot between Watch Hill, Rhode Island, and Chatham, Massachusetts, under a storm surge warning for 3 to 5 feet. 2 to 4 feet storm surge warning in effect from Long Island, from East Rockaway Inlet, all the way to Oyster Bay on the north coast, and from Greenwich, Connecticut to Watch Hill, Rhode Island. So again, it's kind of that middle, if we cut about 2/3 in half, if we keep 1/3 attached to New York City and 2/3 of Long Island in the warning zone, that's about where that storm surge warning is in effect for. 2 to 4 feet also expected from Chatham, Massachusetts to Sagamore Beach, Massachusetts, including Cape Cod Bay, and again from Greenwich, Connecticut down to Oyster Bay on the north side of Long Island. That includes Flushing and the Long Island Sound, and then again from Mastic Beach on the south coast of Long Island to East Rockaway Inlet. 2 to 4 feet, it's a storm surge watch at the moment. 1 to 3 feet from Cape May, New Jersey to East Rockaway Inlet, New York. Again, that includes New York City in that right there. So again, storm surge a big concern, rainfall a big concern, wind also a concern as we see those hurricane warnings in effect for areas. I would not be surprised if we see hurricane watches issued closer towards New York City tonight, where those tropical storm warnings are currently in effect, as the model guidance has really shifted further to the west today. And I'll show you guys that here in a second. Let's take a look at the H-Wharf, keeping a relative lid on Henri as compared to some models. And this model bringing Henri relatively to the east of most of the models. And I'll show you the spaghetti plots here in a second for Henri. But you see it just skimming Long Island before hitting Connecticut, and then of course it stays there for a day. Remember, that's the big thing here. It stays there for quite some time, dropping rain, but luckily weakening as it does so. Again, it's no Harvey in terms of it sitting there maintaining its strength. It's sitting there and weakening. It's no Sandy in terms of it being a massive storm, but it's still going to be a big one, still going to be one for the books. One that we're going to continue to watch. Let's talk first about the GFS. That's on the left-hand side of the screen. You see now everywhere in play, as it kind of has been from New York City to Cape Cod, and a decent amount of the models definitely have New York City in the picture. You can hardly tell where New York City is on that map. Much the same for the European model, anywhere about halfway down New Jersey to Cape Cod. On that model, again, New York City certainly in the realm of possibility for Henri's landfall point. I wouldn't say it's the most likely, but certainly it could be not too far from the center of the storm. Then we take a look at the spaghetti models. There's 2 schools of thought at the moment. One is much like the H-Wharf, like I showed you guys, much like the National Weather Service forecast at the moment, taking the storm just up New Long Island and then into Connecticut. There are, notably though, a handful of models that bring the storm into New York City directly here 2 days from now. Then that's something we're going to want to watch very, very carefully. I can't stress this enough. Again, New York City is going to have impacts regardless, but it could have significant impacts depending on where exactly Henri decides to make its turn. Again, this will get revised with better model data as they begin to assimilate the data from the planes that are going into Henri. But we're really going to get a better idea of where Henri is going to make that turn, where exactly it's going to go over the next few days. Nonetheless, we're really going to want to watch where this goes. Stay tuned for watches and warnings for those to change and be updated over the next few days. As we see for intensity, still an outside chance of Cat 2, decent chance of a Cat 1, and again, Cat 1 is the current expectation at this point in time. There's a potential it makes it to Cat 1 status and then makes it back down to tropical storm status before it makes landfall. Remember, as this storm begins to weaken, the wind field will expand. So although it's a weakening storm, it's not really weakening. The amount of energy in it's probably staying about the same. It's just the wind field is growing as it weakens. It kind of gets more evenly distributed, if that makes any sense. So keep that in mind, especially along New England, New York. Keep an eye on this storm very closely. Again, don't want to go too crazy here. I mean, it's not a done deal that big cities will be impacted. I mean, it's probably going to stay between New York City and Cape Cod, but nonetheless, everywhere in between, including those places, even New Jersey, probably needs to be staying very closely attentive to where Henri goes over the next few days. We'll have more updates out as Henri gets closer to landfall. We might even have a double update out on tomorrow or Sunday, or both if I really feel about it, because of Henri's big concern that we're going to want to keep an eye on. We're also watching a wave off the coast of Africa. That should be no threat to land, which is a good thing. It's going to go straight out to sea, 20% chance of formation in the next 5 days. However, 6 to 10 days from now, we're watching the Gulf of Mexico. Pretty decent signal showing up in the models. So we'll keep you guys updated on that system for potential development here in a week or two. That's all for now. Chris takes the new further, Catholic Media.